In this week's video, we are going to be installing our internal bike store for the van on fully extending drawer slides, somewhat like this. Let's see how it goes. This is all rather tricky. Let me explain. So, these are the bikes, looking resplendent on their new, way better quality bike mounts. And basically, I've just got this sort of this trade-off going on, which is how close do I put all the bikes together, and how much do I slot them together and save space, versus how much of a pain is it going to be to put the bikes in and out of the van. So I think I've come up with a bit of a compromise of the bikes are offset from themselves front to back, which then makes the whole thing a bit longer. So this is now 170 centimeters long rather than the planned 160 centimeters, but you know, what's that? That'll be right. I'm somewhat exceeding the weighted rate capacity of these bike racks. It's supposed to be, I think, 22 kilos. These are 28 kilograms. So I'm trying to give everything as much of a helping hand as possible. The bike mounts themselves are going to be mounted onto some L channel. The way it's working is I've got these two M5 bolts recessed into the back of the plywood. Aluminium. This is aluminium. That's going to go onto our lovely plywood bike rack. This slots on top and is going to get fastened down with M5 nuts. I'm going to put some Loctite on this interface to try and make sure these don't start spinning on their own. This aluminium bar then is going to get screwed down onto the plywood sheet, and because this is now much wider than this originally was, this is just going to put a lot less force on the various screw fixings. Plus I've got 6 of them rather than 2. These are twin thread screws, which I heard are arguably better. I wanted the best possible solution for this, because you know quite a lot of force could be on this. But yeah, these are absolutely rock solid.
These are the drawer slides we got for ease of taking the bikes in and out of the van. They have the advantage of being lockable, so the drawer doesn't move around while we're faffing with the bikes. It's complicated, but here's how we installed it.
First thing is to find and mark up all of these holes. You want to make sure that this slide does not move whilst you're doing this marking up, because otherwise it'd be very annoying. So get the slide where you want it, and I already marked up in the van where that needs to be. Bosh. Right. As you can see, that one, nice and easy. Straight see it. That one, nice and easy. Now as we go further along, they get a bit weird. So let's unlock the drawer. Now I can get to this one, but I can't get to the one at the end, which is actually what I want to do. So you release this funny catch, and that allows you to push it further. Then you got this one. So I've got that one. There's one under here. There's one here, there's one here. Now there's one more hidden here. Now I can't get to this because actually this clamp I'm using to hold this in place is in the way. So I'm going to remove that clamp gently and make sure nothing moves. Seem to remember. And there it is. And that's the last bolt hole. So they are all marked up. I just remove this and then use my fancy centre punch. This is my overcompensating Starrett centre punch with a really fine tip, which I like because you can. The finer the tip on a centre punch, I find the more accurate you're just going to be always. So go get a fine tip one. If you're going to smash into material and don't like using a fine tip for that, get two and then just enlarge the centre punch hole with the second centre punch. If it's too girthy, you don't know where you are. So for this I'm using two types of bolts. I'm using this grade 8 countersunk M6, and that is for, there's two locations which have a countersunk hole on the rail side, so that works well. For the other holes I'm just using a M6 by 16 without a washer, because with a washer it's sometimes interfered with the rail, but it's bearing on steel, so on that side it's not going to matter. So yeah, don't tighten up any of the bolts until they're all in, and make sure that everything wants to sit nicely, especially these countersunk ones. The countersunk ones are actually really what define the location of this rail more than anything else. So you want these to be both as happy as you can, and then start tightening things down. And at some point I'll swap these all over for lock nuts. Now, how am I going to mark up the bolt locations for the inner drawer? Now, I was dithering about this quite a lot, and what I decided for the moment, but again I'm going to sleep on it and see if it's wise, if I just unlock this drawer slide and scratch my lovely floor by just sliding this back, and I realign this inner with where it wants to be, which is just there, I now have access to the first set of bolt holes that I can mark through here onto the aluminium. All I need to do now, in theory, is take this inner tray out of the van, and then just measure up the hole locations, because the heights are going to be identical all the way down. I choose one of these as being the height. I measure that same height all the way down, and I choose one of these as my starting location, and I just will measure all the way down where these holes need to land. I think that's the way I'm going to do it, because I can't think of a way of accurately templating through every single hole, because I can't extend the slide enough in order to do that. I'm not sure about that decision. Maybe there's a way to do it, and if there's a way to do it, you'll see it, because that will be preferable. But for the moment, the measuring solution, will work. That'll be good enough. I need to be a couple of millimeter accurate. That won't be a problem. Sounds a bit famous last wordsy, doesn't it? It is the next day. I have slept on it, and yes, templating it is going to be better than measuring it. The problem I thought I was going to have was I don't have space in the van to extend out the drawer slide fully in such a way that I was going to be happy that all the heights were going to still line up. So distance left and right, I'm going to use the slides itself as a template, so I'll just take these off and just use that to template it. But to get the heights, I've made a little scribing tool, so I have a consistent height of all the holes on the left and right hand side drawers. I'm just going to, I'll just be using the sliders to determine the position of all the holes on the drawer sliders. So this is the template, and I'll show you how it works. Now I have a Sharpie line down both of the side tray L supports things at exactly the same height, and now I shall go and mark up the hole positions. That was the right call. So this is the setup. I've clamped the rail in place, so we're flush with the front. It's clamped in place, and you can see my line, my Sharpie mark line in here is in the middle of all the holes I want to use. And that's the very last one. You get to the others by just moving the slider. So I think I'm actually just going to go and drill straight through, because these are going to be the best guide I can get. All marked up and ready to drill. I'm pretty happy that's a good way to do it. No measuring. Lack of measuring is always a good sign. The slides in the van. All the slide components are bolted together. So the inner tray is bolted to the rails, which is bolted to this L support. Everything's tight. I think the best thing I can do is just mark this down and get it attached. It's going to be excellent. I'm really looking forward to this actually moving and actually taking a long time, and it's really heavy. That's without the bikes on it. So yeah, but it's sturdy. Probably stronger than the van, to be honest. In order to drill through the floor of the van, you really want to avoid drilling into some of the beams which run crossways. I'm not sure what the term is for that, but there are many beams which run across the width of the van. I'm going to be drilling through this floor in order to bolt the back of the bike carrying rails to the van floor through the floor. It's going to be levering a lot of force. It's going to be trying to pull up on the back side. So rather than just screw it into the floor, then have that force transferred into then trying to pull the floor up, I'm going to through bolt the back of the rails so it's much stronger. So how do we find out where these rails actually lie? Now I've done two methods. One is I had a 360 photograph, and I use the 360 photograph as reference because you can see where these beams lie from the shape of all the corrugations in the bottom of the van, and that gave me these marks with photo against them. I then did another method which I think is much more accurate, where I've got this beam in the van. This is 90 degrees, so the angle between this and this is 90 degrees, and I then just go underneath the van with a laser measurer and also a tape measure. I did both methods to see if they agreed, and just measure from here, this surface, to the beams, and then measure from this surface onto the floor. Because this is 90 degrees, the measurements on the bottom should translate directly to the measurements at the top. I mean, within a few mil. This is not perfectly 90, but it's good enough. If I just go for something safely in the middle of the beams, so we've got flange, beam, flange, flange, beam, flange, so this is what I measured. If I go for something fairly safely in the middle for the first hole that I drill, I will then have that as an actual reference I can use for the rest of the hole. So the very first hole that I do will tell me how good these measurements were, and I can then adjust them from there. I'm going to be drilling 4 holes through the bottom of the van. There is a fairly significant chance that one of the holes ends up trying to drill on one of these 45-degree corrugations, on the 45-degree edge of the corrugation. If that happens, it just isn't really going to drill. I think I am going to have a think about using this drill press to do it in the van, because that way, as I say, I mean, worst comes to the worst, I can even screw this into the van floor itself. You will never see it because it's going to be underneath where the bike slides are going to be. I could screw this down into the van floor so it never ever moves if I have to. and then just force my way through with as many drill bits as it takes. I didn't measure that carefully enough. It's ended up just inside here.
I measured where the rails that run along the width of the van are, but forgot about the rails that run front to back. I have drilled into one of these, meaning I need to shift everything closer to the middle of the van.
So I'm going to have a stop for a bit and have a think, because the problem is it looks like, well, simplistically I need to move the entire bike rack 13 centimeters over. The problem with that is I think it starts to interfere too much with the whole sort of kitchen ensemble and fridge stuff, so that might not be an option. We have both had a think, and turns out we just need to have the bike straight. So I'm going to do some triple checking of some measurements, but this clears the door, and it also clears all the structural beams, all of the structural beams now, not just some of them. That's not going to get old for a while, it's pretty good. So this is pretty close to the final position, so I'm just going to go and measure things up a bit more carefully, check everything's straight. Take two. The first one is just to practice. These are getting bolted down with M6 bolts, so I'm going to open this up to 6.5mm to give this a fairly loose fit. There's going to be a really chunky washer on the top anyway, so I don't mind if the hole's a bit loose. Lol. Okay, I think I'll have a little quick review to check I'm happy with. Oh god. Yeah, that was always going to happen. I'll have a clean up and then a review to see if I like what it's doing, and then I'll move on to the next bolts in the middle. And that is the last set of supports done. So we've got two sets, one slightly further forward and one right at the back, and as you can see, very nicely load spread out, so there's no point loads on the bottom of the van, so that's lovely. I've got to say, it's nice having being able to get underneath a van or a vehicle without needing ramps and stuff, but it is a little bit tight under here.
Oh, hey.